everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Bear Share Show. This is your host, Andre Matoyer, and today I'm joined by an amazing guest, Mr. Zane Landon. Zane, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Um, I am so glad you decided to come on the show because I know that you have a pretty awesome background in mental health issues, especially in the queer space. And I wanted to sort of pick your brain and get to know more about what you've done and how you've done it. And I think you have a lot of good stuff to say, especially with some of the more recent publications you've been in, which has been awesome. So, that being said, why don't you take a minute and introduce yourself and tell me more about you and where you're at?
Absolutely. Thank you again for this opportunity. I'm Zane Landon. My pronouns became his. I'm from California. I've been here for 24 years, and I'm 24 years old. So I've really been in California for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just even start off saying that, I started feeling this awareness of my queerness when I was in middle school. Of course, a lot of the times we don't really know what that means, especially since for me, I didn't know exactly how I identified, and it still moves today because sexuality is very fluid, right? And so for me, sometimes I identify as bisexual, sometimes I identify as gay, but it's always gay or bisexual. It's never completely straight.
Okay.
So it's always kind of moving depending on how I feel, and it was definitely hard, growing up feeling that way because I always thought that sexuality was such a binary, and so I kind of felt kind of constrained, and how I felt about my sexuality because I didn't think I could go past that. I always thought it was either black and white, and I didn't want to identify as fully gay. So when I learned about bisexuality, I just resonated with it a lot. But I think the restrictions that you have to put on yourself, your sexuality, I think can do a lot of decline to your mental health. That's why I see a lot of people who are queer who have mental health conditions or problems, because I think that it takes a toll when you have to deny your real self, your authentic self for the longest time. And so that's something I had to come to terms with. And that's what I see. I see a lot of queer people who experience this. I think a lot of it has to do with what they've been told, the shame that is associated with being queer, the homophobia, the biphobia, transphobia, whatever it is. That really takes a toll on your mental health. And then as you're going through this and you're feeling these feelings of being queer, you think there's something wrong with you, and I can't imagine how it doesn't take a toll on your mental health. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I always experienced mental health conditions from a young age. It wasn't my queerness led to mental health. It was more so I already experienced mental health conditions from a very young age before I even realized I was queer. So that was a pretty interesting dynamic, and I was pretty fortunate to belong to a family that took mental health very seriously, and that they knew the importance of seeing a therapist or a psychologist, and that medication is very useful. My mom would always go on, rants about people who don't believe in medication, and there are provable evidence that medication helps people who have mental health conditions. So she was always very open about taking medication because there's a lot of people that still just are not open to it. They don't think medication that impacts your mental health is important, not like a medication for heart condition.
Right. Yeah. People don't equate physical health and mental health the same. I think it's because physical health, they can see it, right? Like you injured yourself. Or if you're sick, you have symptoms of the illness, like you're coughing, sneezing, or you're weak. Like those things are very measurable, right? When it's a mental health issue, you have to take the word of the other person that what they're experiencing is true.
Mm-hmm.
And in most cases, people, especially, in previous generations more so, it was just like, oh, well, tough it out or deal with it, or, it's really not that big of a deal. They'll try to use general ways to bypass the fact that the mental issue is real. So yeah, it's unfortunate. I would say that I think it's gotten better. Remember, mental health is a relatively newer field of health. Even though it's been studied for the past couple hundred years, it's still in the long term of human history a pretty newer science. So,
yeah. And then I also say I think what's pretty interesting is I think that there's a component of being able to control it. I think that's what people think. And so when someone has a heart condition or they have diabetes, that sometimes you may not necessarily be able to control that. And I think that people recognize that. But for some reason with mental health, it doesn't correlate with that. Some people go, well, it's in your mind, so you have the power of your mind to change that. I definitely believe in like the power of positive thinking, but I think it can
Sure.
only lead you to it can only lead you to so many places. I think that
Yeah.
you may need that extra step of medication to get there, but there are different small steps you can take like that. But I think at the end of the day, for some, not everyone, it's psychology or taking
Yeah.
medication is going to work for everyone. But I think that because that people think that they can control the mind, that
Yeah.
um, people who need medication, like they can just control it. Well, again, it may be like a medical condition where they cannot control it.
Yeah.
And then I will say, I didn't become a serious advocate until I entered university, and then I learned a lot about mental health more because I definitely experienced more serious mental health. I was engaging in self harm, experiencing suicidal
Oh,
thoughts. University is not. I know a lot of people go to university, but it's not for the faint of heart. There's some norms that people have to go through in university that, for some reason, they're accepted with. They're going to be stressed. They're going to be
yeah.
experiencing life crises. I don't know why we accept these,
Yeah.
but that's kind of like the
It's
what people
because it
expect from
challenges
university.
you. Yeah, like university challenges you. If you don't come out of the other side a different person, I don't know what you were doing. you know, it definitely challenges you. Um, I want to go back to what you were saying earlier about how mental health, like being able to control it. So I think that exercise is something you can control, and and that can help some. Surrounding yourself in a positive environment and those sort of things, watching your triggers, those sort of things can help. But I always tell people, like with medication, that you have to look at it as like you might be normal, and that's great for you, but this individual isn't. Like there's scientific evidence where their neurons are maybe uptaking too much or not producing enough regular brain chemicals, just to be very general. And so these medications are designed to offset that. So if someone is deficient or just isn't quite right, and a medication makes them normal, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's sort of how people go, oh, yeah, I didn't think about that, because you only know yourself, right? Like we can't jump in each other's brains. So if we don't, a lot of people, if they don't experience something themselves, they have a hard time relating, which is sad. But I just remind people, like, it's great that you're able to think this way. Like a lot of people just don't think this way, so try to put yourself in their shoes, and then the medication does make them think this way, and people will notice. Like, I think what turns people onto it is when they see a loved one go on medication and realize, like, oh, I see a difference in their behavior, it is working, and then they become more of an advocate for it, which is great.
Yeah, that's unfortunate that we don't take things seriously until they really impact us or our family
Yeah.
members. And I think that that was probably one of the positive benefits that the pandemic kind of left on us. And I know that the pandemic was a
Yeah.
very horrible tragedy for millions of
It was a
people.
reflective period, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you didn't stop and think about who you were, I mean, we saw that in the job market, people deciding to quit their job and finding passions and changing their priorities, essentially. Like, yeah, I think people also experienced mental health issues being in quarantine. Like, they couldn't go out, they couldn't do some of the stuff they're used to. I know friends of mine that go to the gym all the time, and they were like losing their mind, because they couldn't go, they were closed. So I think once people start getting a taste of it, they go, "Oh yeah, I get it," you know.
Yeah,
And
I
that's
think
yeah. I was just gonna say, like, that helps change when people are more understanding to other people's needs.
yeah, I think wow, yeah, I agree. I think the quarantine really dampened people's mental health, and I think that this was a time where there may have been people that never experienced the decline of mental health before like this, and so now they were really understanding what it means to experience mental health decline more than anyone. And like you
Yeah.
said, until you experience it yourself, and that's why so many people were talking about mental health, and unfortunately, it wasn't kind of brought into the mainstream media as a conversation. But I was seeing it within quarantine. I was seeing it within the screen that people were talking about mental health. And for once, I think that many people in mass amounts were taking time for themselves and focusing on themselves,
Yeah.
which is why we saw a lot of people maybe resigning from their job because they were focusing on themselves and they were kind of over being, treated a certain way, and they
Hmm.
wanted to put priority in themselves and their career and wanted to be at a
Yeah.
place where they could be productive and not what's it called, you know,
Well, stuck and just going through the motions of life, and then all of a sudden they wake up and they're 55 and they're like, "What the hell happened to the last 20 years?" Right? Like, No, I think kind of a lot of times there's certain times like when we go on autopilot and there's certain things in our life that sort of trigger that make us stop and reevaluate where we are and to go, wait a minute, like, is what we're doing okay, or is this serving us the same way? I was one of those people that got a different career in the pandemic, and I don't regret it at all. It changed my life, and I'm happier for it. I had friends die. Like, I needed, like, if you didn't start to change your perspective, I don't know what you were doing. Um, but it also kind of bringing it back to the queer space. Like, one of the while it's definitely tough, like your story is similar to mine, similar to many of my friends who had to confront the idea of maybe I'm different, and especially if they grew up in a religious household or maybe in a rural area where they never talk about it, you don't even know it's an option.
Yeah.
But one of the beauties of it is that at a younger age, I was able to question society. Like, I think a lot of my straight friends, and this is an overgeneralization for sure, but like the world is paved for them, right? Like everything is geared toward those sort of ideas. You know what I mean? Like, and so when you are confronted with that challenge, like, oh, at the time I couldn't get married, now I can, but at the time I couldn't. Or, the idea of having kids or, grandkids was, okay, maybe that's not an option anymore. Or like certain things that you assume, oh, I'll get married and have a family and like just kind of follow these traditional things that your parents may have done. You start to go, wait a minute, maybe I can do things differently. And I think you start to sort of branch off instead of going the normal way or traditional way. You can start to branch off and think about your own things more critically. And I say that's been a blessing because I've been able to apply that critical thinking into other areas of my life, whether it be career or politics or people I hang out with, like, and there's people that may not discover that, whatever it took, maybe it was a divorce or maybe they didn't figure out they were gay until they were 50. Like, for some people, it takes a lot longer to get there. So, in one way, I'm trying to look at the silver lining where it was a blessing, if that makes sense.
No, it does. No, sorry. It does. That's great. No, I'm just, wow, I agree with that. And I think for me, I think it is something that unfortunately queer people have to go through, but I feel like we gain a sense of community, and we gain a sense of empathy for others as well. That from a very young age, and you said every story is different. Not everyone experiences it at a young age, but the people that experience it at a young age have to feel these feelings of injustice or inequity, or just these questioning thoughts that they can't bring forward as a child. Again, that can really dampen your mental health because you really think you start to think something's wrong with you. You look at a society that you see a lot of straight people or cis people, and you wonder, I don't fit here, and is there something wrong with me? And I think that you kind of convince yourself, if you're not, especially if you don't belong to a household that embraces that or talks about that, it's easy to fall in line with there's something wrong with me, and I shouldn't be having these thoughts. And again, I feel like the more you deny your true identities, the bigger the toll is going to have on your self-esteem, your security in yourself, your image, even your body image. There's so many things, and also just your mental health. So, yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, one of the things I remember was when I was figuring my stuff out. I was, obviously in the bear community. Like, I was not really attracted to the normal. Like, at the time when I was in high school, that we had Queer Eye. That was like, starting to become. You started to see more gay television, Queer as Folk, Queer Eye, stuff like that. But of course, they pandered toward the majority of the gay community, which tends to be more the, Twinkie, straight guys, etc. Nothing wrong with that, but to me it was confusing because not only now was I trying to figure myself out, but then I was like, well, maybe I'm not gay because I don't like that, And it was just confusing because there was another layer of trying to piece together, like, well, am I even more weird or am I more gross? Or I remember feeling like the guys I'm into, there's no way in hell I'm going to find anyone like that. So I'm going to be alone forever. Like a lot of those things pop into your head, and that's traumatizing because you see all your friends get married and you see all your friends in relationships. And a lot of times, like for me, I didn't even have my first relationship until 2 weeks ago. So like a lot of us become sort of late bloomers in that. And then we feel like there's something wrong with us when really it's just the society that we live in.
Yeah, I know, I agree, and I think that I think the whole world has a huge issue with plus size people or people who have different body types. I think that it's something that I don't see a lot of. And even in the media, people with different body types will be treated very differently. They'll be treated as slovenly or lazy, or they won't, or they'll
Yeah.
be just viewed as a very certain way. And I think that as much as that, I think that gets tiring. Like every single time I'll see someone who's overweight in TV, it's usually for a comedic reason, or they're just not taken
Oh.
seriously. The only time I feel like I will mention this, the only time I felt like I saw someone growing up that was plus size that was given like mysterious treatment was Uncle Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender, which
Oh, I
was
never saw that.
one of my favorite shows, and he's like one of the most powerful, wise characters, and he's overweight, and that didn't mean anything. He was still powerful. He was still very active. His size doesn't mean inactivity.
Mhm.
So I think that there was a lot of things there and that really inspired me. But going through life and not seeing as many plus size people, and the ones I did see, feeling shame for their bodies, and there's plenty of people that try and try and take away from that. Like we see so many things where weight loss is so trendy, and I wonder why. And I understand we encourage people to become healthy, but I think that I think just you can be just like plus size and relatively healthy. But I think we encourage people
Yeah.
to be skinnier because that's what people want to see, and that's what health looks like to them.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily a black and white view that way, if that makes sense.
It's not at all. There's a lot of outdated science when it comes to weight loss, but here's the thing about people, right? People need to feel better than other people to feel better about themselves. So at some point in society, there was a change to where it was like, all right, well, being healthy is being slim. And so if you're slim, you're healthy. There's like that, mentality. And so therefore, people that weren't slim, it was easy to say, "Oh, I'm better than you because I'm slim and you're not." And so that creates this superiority complex where then fat people become inferior just by default. And it's like, "Oh, well, can't you just work out?" and blah blah blah. But like, I'm a great example of someone who, yes, I probably should exercise more, and I'm on and off about it all the time. But my doctor's always like, "You have nothing wrong with you. I'm not even close to diabetic. I don't have any of those issues." It's not so much about like I am healthy, like on paper. I'm not on like really any medications, like so to say I'm not healthy, like sure, there's more things I can do to be healthier, but a skinny guy can be smoking every day, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like yeah, he's skinny, but like his lungs can be shit, and mine can be way better, right? Like we don't know. And it's a really just overgeneralized stigma that needs to go away. Like people's metabolisms aren't factored into that. Um, there's genetics where they can't process certain sugars or foods. Like it's just like who cares? Let people be them. And if someone comes to you for help with weight loss or whatever, not something they care about, then sure you can help them. But otherwise, leave people alone. I hate that shit.
Yeah, I agree. If someone comes to you with actual concern, with your health, and actually will bring forward like a weight loss plan or something, or they're trying to just support you or whatever, I know that they're coming from a place of love. But like,
Yeah.
understand if some people aren't receptive to that, and some people may not want to do that. It's not personal.
Mhm.
Some people just that's not part of their plan. That's not what they want to do. And I think also what's interesting about controlled again, because I think that what's really interesting about this is we think of we think of some aspects of health that are uncontrolled, right? Like even someone who can have type 1 diabetes is out of their control, or so many things
Yeah.
can be genetic. But when it comes to weight and metabolism, we do not see that as something that's uncontrolled. We think like,
Right.
why do you even choose to be overweight? You just go to the gym, like it's so easy. One, it's not easy. Can we just have the conversation? It's not easy. It's it's like one of the hardest things, and overeating can be really hard for some people. And
Mhm.
that's why you have Alcoholics Anonymous. You have Overeaters Anonymous. Overeaters
Mhm.
Anonymous is not as big as Alcoholics Anonymous, but you know
Mhm.
what? There there are support groups, and just to show that it's a journey. It's not easy, and it's not as simple as going to the gym. And
Right.
especially when
Everyone has something.
yeah,
Everyone has something, right? Like, yes, you might have amazing eating habits. You don't have the same addictive food triggers as someone else, but maybe you're a compulsive gambler or you have a sex addiction or you're addicted to cigarettes, or you know what I mean, or you're a meth addict. Like, I'm not judging, but I'm saying like everyone has a vice of some kind, right? And honestly, if someone overeats a little bit and they tend to just be a little bit overweight, but maybe they're trying to combat that, I think that's better than. I think there's things that are worse. I'll just say that, you know.
Yeah, and I
Like,
think that the reason why, people who are plus size will experience, different mental health, conditions or issues or problems is because, not because of just their body type alone, but because, of course, what society has told them, and kind of in a way gaslit them to think it's their fault how they are,
yeah,
instead of embracing their body and saying this is who you are, you should, you know, love yourself, but also consider your health, all those different things. But
yeah,
it doesn't, which is why you see, which is why people who are overweight who do everything they can to have a certain body, or they'll just be ashamed of their body, and it's just a very sad thing to see.
it is. I always just say it. Like, I get it to some degree. Like, I think there's a mentality where it's like, if you know you could be better and you aren't doing your best, I can see a little bit of that being hard. But like, I think it's not all or nothing. Like, don't beat yourself up over it. But also, like, if you have a goal, work to your goal, but don't beat yourself up. Because like, health specifically is from the day you're born to the day you die. Like, it's an ongoing thing. Even if you get the body you want or you think you want, it could change in 2 years. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine he's been working out pretty much since the pandemic started, and he's done a really nice job. Like, he's come a long way, and he's found a new passion in it, and I'm very proud of him. But he like still doesn't like how he looks, and I'm like, you've made significant gains in the past like 2.5 years. You should be very proud of yourself. And I told him, I said, the reason, like, you should be coming from this position of your body, from a position of love, because, for example, if you're coming from a position of I have to be perfect all the time, if a life event happens to you and you can't go to the gym for 1 or 2 months, you're just going to be like, oh, I hate myself, I hate myself. But if you come from a position of love where you love yourself and you're like, hey, I'm going to go to the gym because I love my body and today, and I'm going to love it tomorrow, and it's like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to the gym for love, I'm not going because I hate myself. Then you're more able to adapt to those situations of like, oh, it's a life event, it's fine. I still love me. I'll go when I can go back again. I broke a leg, or, I moved, or something happened, right? Like, you can be more in flux with it, and you're not beating yourself up all the time. Because really, no one else is thinking that. Like, I can't, oh, you gained 10 pounds? Sorry, I didn't notice. Like, oh, you lost 10 pounds? Cool. Like, at least we're more hard on ourselves, is my point. So just love ourselves more, and it's a lot less stress.
And what I find interesting about that is I've heard that where, go to the gym at a place of love for your body and not hatred. And what I find interesting is when people do, who I've known, that they'll go to the gym for hatred and they'll get the body they want. They definitely never came to terms with what the real issue was there. Was it that they hated their body? Was it they hated themselves? Because there was a lot of things. It wasn't just their body. And so maybe they did like their body, but then there was a whole new aspect of themselves they didn't like, and they focused on that. I actually wrote an article because I think this is important too. I think having plus-size people in representation is incredibly important. So they're not seen as, again, slovenly, lazy, all these horrible stereotypes. And I said that, even in the workplace, it's a huge issue because, working in different corporate roles and internships, I've always seen that I still see very similar body types. People who wear suits who are very skinny, and I'll occasionally see someone who's plus size. But then when I would tour the warehouse, a lot of the warehouse workers were overweight. And so I was wondering, I was like, what is this message that we're sending here? Like, and I'm nothing's wrong with being a warehouse worker at all, but it's like, so they get to be overweight. Why can't corporate be that way? Why is corporate not being inclusive? And they may not be purposely, excluding, but like they are still like subconsciously picking people that they think fit the mold of what traditional corporate is, and that is someone who can wear a suit that's thinner, not someone who's overweight. And even like the research I've done, like of course people who are overweight or past opportunities don't get paid as much, or do not get promotions because of their body and what they're viewed or perceived as to be, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, corporate's all about making money. And if the entire world will all of a sudden say being fat is in, maybe you'll see that change because they just want they'll change with whatever the consumers want, right? And but for the better part of a century here, like being slim, being a certain way is considered, that is the top of the line. So if that's going to be your face of your brand, your image, whatever, like they're going to do that. And I think that's just because from the day people have been born till, just how it is, they're subconsciously, like you said, they're doing those things because that's considered better, right? We've decided to make fat people inferior to others. And that's unfortunately how people are. Again, I think stopping and being critical about this stuff is good. Like, hey, have you noticed this? Maybe we should do better, right? So.
And I think that, oh my goodness, I think that so many people, kind of like what you said at the beginning, that people who maybe didn't identify as queer didn't have to experience that self-reflection or critique of the world that person who's queer would have been growing up, or just queer in general. I think that goes to say for people who are plus size as well, is that people who have a certain body type can navigate the world a lot easier. They don't have to think about all the time, like you said before, like most people are probably not thinking about your body, but in your mind they are. And so like when you're walking and like maybe you're having trouble or you're just sitting somewhere, you really think like, are people looking at me? How do I look in this? How do I feel about myself? I think there's so many things you have to go through internally. And again, that can take a huge damp on your mental health. And there's so many things that it contributes to, as opposed to just, can't I just go in the office? But no, I have to think about everything else and how I look. It can be hard.
Shopping.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's so many times where I just have to buy and I just have to buy it online. Like, and it always cracks me up because there's two trains of thought to this. It's that, like, either the stores don't order like 2XLs or they're out of them, meaning that everyone already bought them. And I think it's more of that second one, because every time I go into stores, they're like, oh yeah, we sold out of the 2XLs. It's like, your smalls aren't selling. Like, you think more people are small, but most people are XL or 2XLs. Like, put that more in stock. You know what I mean? But like, we'll go to a store and we can't buy anything. It's frustrating.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, please order more sizes. Goodness. Oh my gosh, and I even put in the article that, like when companies have merchandise, yeah, I'm sure you've experienced this, getting we're throwing free shirts, and you grab it, it's a small. Come on.
Yeah, or a medium. Yeah.
And you can't exchange it for something else. Or there was one time where I went to an event and they had a 3X. I was like, whoa. I was like, what's going on here? That was really cool. They're like, we got you. I'm like, that's really surprising. But I was really happy to see something like that happen. But I usually don't. But yeah, that's one thing I mentioned, that, there's so many different things. Even like just talking about body discrimination in the workplace happens all the time. Even if it's happening not blatantly. And that's a lot. That is like actually what you see. You may not see blatant racism or blatant sexism, whatever it is, but you'll see like these discreet messages coming from people, and you'll see it come out, and it may not be blatant. And because it's not blatant, you think, oh, how do I bring this up? But I think that I don't see a lot of people addressing like size discrimination. Like even when you see like diversity, equity, inclusion videos, it'd be really interesting if they had a fat phobia section where you had an example of someone who's actually overweight experiencing that in the workplace, and see how people think, because some people don't even consider it an issue in the workplace at all.
No, well, they'll just say, because again, weight is controllable. So, like, you can't control your race. You're born that way, right? But people think, oh, your weight's controllable. So, like, oh, just lose weight and then it'll stop. But it's like, no, that you're missing the point. Like, yeah, it's frustrating. I'm not agreeing with that. I'm just saying, like, that's what people will say.
No, definitely. I understand that people will say that, but I think that's just really, I don't understand that. It's people's choice to look how they want, and I don't know, just because
I just don't think it's anyone's business. Yeah.
If it's not impacting the work, it's not impacting the job, I think you should you should be okay with that, as long as they're being productive. You know what I mean? And also I don't understand why it's such like, so because something is in their control. We have the right to, it's warranted to shame them because they've made these
Right.
specific life choices that have led to that. But what's
Right.
the
Right.
problem though? Is it actually hurting production? If it's not, who cares? Like, it really isn't.
Yeah.
If it's going to actually hurt production, then that's a different story. But like, but even so with that, you should definitely consider how you do that. Like,
Yeah.
but if it's really not doing anything harmful to the work, I don't think there's anything wrong with letting them be them.
Yeah. Again, it's just humans deciding they want to put themselves in a hierarchical system to feel better about themselves. Because you could say it's the same thing about people that are poor, right? Like someone could be fit, but then you find out they live in the ghetto, and oh, now they're inferior to you because they're poor or something. Like there's discrimination for that too. Like it's just if you're not rich, if you're not skinny, if you're not in shape or like a certain body type, or if you're not straight, like you're going to have challenges because the world isn't made for you. And it sucks. It's harder.
Yeah, and I think that it's unfortunate that people have to do this, but I
Hmm.
think that it's something that people have to do. I think people have to be unapologetically themselves, and they have to
Yes.
enter and disrupt spaces that aren't for them. And it's unfortunate they have to do that because you really feel like an outsider coming in. You don't feel
Yep.
included inside. So when you do that, you wonder, oh my gosh, am I going to lose my job? Am I going to come across as a certain way? Even in queer spaces where you see TV
Hmm.
shows or even pride events where a lot of people have a certain body type. And that's why, in my opinion, you see these different communities like bears and cubs
Hmm.
because they've had to do that because they weren't embraced, they weren't included. And it's
Right.
unfortunate that they actually had to split off and create their own community when LGBTQ is supposed to be the community for them. And it's unfortunate that that happens. And now the communities are so strong that they're going to stay. But it's unfortunate that they had to
Right.
split off. In my opinion, that's why there's a lot of LGBTQ identities that sometimes don't feel like they're part of the LGBTQ space because they
Hmm.
haven't been fully, included. So I would love to see that more because, especially, I see bear events and like I see them and I think they're really exciting to see. But like then I'll see just the national pride events or the city's pride event. I don't see a lot of those people represented. And it's unfortunate that bear
No.
events have to exist and they can't seamlessly really coexist. They feel separate sometimes.
Yeah, it's like a subcategory of that category.
Yeah.
And I've even had to explain to friends like about certain events, like, oh hey, I got tickets to this event. Oh, it's not a bear event. It's a regular gay event, and I've had to like preference that. And sometimes they're like, oh no, I don't want to go to that. Or maybe they're like, oh yeah, sure, that could be fun. But like, we still have to make that distinction because of the world. But it's just safety, right? So like, if we're with people that are more like us, we feel safer in numbers. Um, Again, that's just human nature. I wanted to actually, you mentioned your article about like stories and whatnot and ways to sort of help with mental health because I think it's very prominent, obviously, in that queer space. So, can you share with me more about that article that you wrote and what you were trying to say in that piece?
I wrote two articles for Entrepreneur, and one of them was about how to create more of a culture of mental health in the workplace or startups. The second one I wrote was about how does the workplace actually address the community of people who are plus size. And so what's interesting was I mentioned in the plus size article that, and this kind of goes into mental health because I said that I wish the workplace would facilitate more conversations on body image. And I know that you have to tread lightly on that. That's not something that can easily be done. And if you're going to do that, you need experts. You need people who are going to come in that know what they're talking about. Because
Right.
I think that it's very sensitive body image, and there are people in the workplace that may not be willing to have that conversation. But I think that they're a huge chunk that would actually, and that they would like to talk about how they feel in certain things they have to wear, how they feel in the workplace, or if they experience body discrimination. But again, you have to be like very clear that it's confidential. This is just to see what the company can do to change things. But I think that if we can start having more open conversations about body image and discrimination, I think more
Yeah.
people will be surprised how many people experience it. I think it's very common. I just would think again, because
Very.
I'm a disability advocate, and again, people think that disability is a very underrepresented group, it's treated that way. But it's actually a very huge community where 25% of the whole entire globe has a disability. So a quarter has a disability. So it's not that this group is like just a very small fraction. And even if they were, who cares? It's like they still, deserve to have their
Yeah.
stories told and be included. And so I think what I always say with disability is, once once people feel included that they can share about their disability, they'll be very surprised the people around them who have a disability as well,
Yeah.
or know people who are caretakers or caregivers, whatever it is. And so I think people would be surprised that, you know, even people who are not like plus size. I mean, even people who just have like maybe just like an average body type may experience body issues. We just don't see it that way. We always think, oh, people who are very skinny or people who are very overweight experience body issues. Again,
Sure.
that binary. And
Hmm.
instead, it's like there's a huge spectrum, and I think that people are experiencing body issues all the time. We just do not give people the platform to speak on it.
We don't. And it's because it's something that's like, it's solved. That's what they think, right? Oh, run. You'll lose weight. You'll be healthy. You'll fit. Just do that.
And then for the people who are really skinny, just eat more. It's very
Yeah.
problematic.
Oh, yeah. The other way around, totally. Like, oh, they need to eat a cheeseburger. Like,
Oh gosh, yeah.
yeah. Like, there's people that have maybe they have some sort of issue where they can't put on weight and they've got frail bones, or there's like a metabolism issue where they have a super fast one. Like, we a one size fits all way of thinking about people never works because it's not everybody. Um, no, I think that's a really good topic, and I'm hope that throughout. I hope that over time that gets mentioned more and pushed more and included with some of the diversity trainings and some of those things you hear about. Um, what bothers me is those people that think it's shouldn't be an issue. The same people that don't that call the left or whatever. Um, like they think that we're pushing too much, diversity or inclusion, and it's not necessary. And I just say to them, well, it is, and you don't notice it because you're not one of those people. So why don't you just go along with it? Because obviously there's a reason why we're doing it.
I agree, and I don't. I don't think that we're doing enough. Um,
No.
and I think that it's interesting people say that there's a push for diversity, equity, inclusion, and it's a little much. Girl, 3 years ago that wasn't even happening.
Okay.
A lot of these
All right.
companies weren't even doing that like 3 years ago. So I think that there's a huge push, but like it really wasn't that much before. And again, I
Okay.
think another thing with COVID-19 was it really accelerated diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like there were definitely companies doing DEI work, and some of them have been doing it for years. But the massive scale I see companies doing it now is just amazing. And I think it
That's
had to do with George Floyd, had to do with the pandemic, had to do with a lot of different things. But the moment these things happened, people realized, oh, you know what, employees have value and that they want to be treated a certain way. And
Yeah.
like everywhere I go, I see huge diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives being put in place. But again, even though it's a huge push, it's still not enough in my opinion. So since
Okay.
we have groups that are underrepresented, like disability, indigenous folks, people who are plus size, there's so many, and trans people, there's so many groups that are like underrepresented, that are underrepresented still. You know what I mean? Even though underrepresented groups, I feel like the groups I mentioned are like the underrepresented of the underrepresented, and they're not getting.
They need to be represented.
Yeah, and so
Like,
like I'll see
yeah.
companies that will not focus on those communities because there's apparently not enough of them. Why isn't there enough of them? Is it because your hiring practices, or you're not bringing in people, or maybe people who are indigenous are not seeing indigenous people at your company? And
Correct.
once you don't have, and even it's not that. Oh, let's say you have a lot of indigenous people who are working like in a warehouse. Again, what does that say about your company? Do you have any
Yeah.
indigenous folks on your leadership teams, senior leadership levels? And again, nothing's wrong with being a warehouse worker, but how are people going to think when that's all you're hiring? It gives off a message still.
Yeah, it gives off a message of like a hierarchical system. Like, if everyone on your board is white and everyone that works in the warehouse isn't, I mean, maybe that's how it ended up being, but let's do better and maybe have someone representing them who gets it, because chances are the board isn't getting them. So,
Yeah,
totally
I
agree.
think the subtle messaging that people, because some people think, well, that wasn't our intention. Well, that's fine. And now that you recognize that it was still problematic, even if it wasn't your intention, because I think that people will get hung up on being called like racist or being called something like that, and so they'll definitely be like, "I'm not that," and they'll get defensive. And that wasn't my intention. Well, that's fine. And
Right.
I'm not saying that you were just outwardly racist, but these are some issues that exist,
Point.
and like you have your power to change it. So I wouldn't get defensive. I would just
Yeah.
say, "Hey, what can we actually do to take the proper action to reverse this, or actually create a more inclusive company?" You know what I mean?
Yeah. I like the term bias.
Hmm.
I think that's less aggressive than racist. I mean, obviously, there's people that are absolutely racist, but
Right.
I think a lot of people grow up with a bias of some kind, and it could be about a type of people, and they might associate racism with like, oh, I'm going to go out and hurt them, or like, the extreme.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is racist, but bias is a form of racism that is subtle, and you don't always know you're doing it because you don't know better, or you weren't instructed, you know you weren't taught a different way or informed of a different way of being. And so I think admitting that you have bias isn't, there's nothing wrong with that, and then going, oh, like, now that I'm informed and I'm aware of this, I can be more cognizant. um, a great example for me was, as more people have been more comfortable sharing their pronouns and how they want to be included, I think that's great, because even someone like me who's been in the gay world for a while, it was really only the last few years that people have started to say, "Hey, call me they," and I'm like, "Okay, that's fine," and that's been a new thing for me where I had to adjust to that and get over some of my bias with how that was, because I just didn't know better, and had to be informed.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with that. Like, we're growing. And I think that's the best way to approach it, is just say, like, everyone has bias. We're just going to challenge those ideas. You're not a straight up racist,
Yeah.
but hey, you could do better by doing this.
Yeah, oh my goodness. I actually completely resonate with this because that's something I always say, that um, every single person has bias, every single one of us. And
Oh
we
yeah.
all need to work on it. Not certain groups don't have bias, we all have bias.
Mm-hmm.
So even within our own communities,
Oh yeah.
especially someone who is Hispanic. Like I'm not treated like that way all the time. And some people will say that's a privilege. I really don't think so. I think I'm afforded different privileges because I'm not maybe seen as Hispanic, but like, but then like again, that's that angle. But the other angle is there are people who are Hispanic who do not consider me Hispanic, who tell me I'm not Hispanic, and they won't embrace me as a Hispanic person. So I think like there are definitely privileges that are afforded there, but then there are definitely like ways you're disadvantaged because I don't get to experience being Hispanic like I want to within the
Yeah.
community that I want to be a part of. So that's again bias within your own communities. That again, looking at sometimes race from a very, very black and white view. Like you have to be a certain skin shade, you have to speak Spanish. So many different things that don't exactly equate to being Hispanic because I just am. Doesn't matter
Yeah.
where I grew up. Doesn't matter if I just only speak English. And so I love the idea that everyone has bias because um, everyone does, and we all have something to work on. That's
Yeah.
I love
It's a
that.
healthy starting place. Yeah. It's a healthy starting place for change. Like, hey, we grew up with a certain idea that maybe we should challenge it. Here's how we can do that. I think that's great that you wrote those papers. I saw you were recently published in a magazine. Which one was that again that you were published in?
Which one was
It was the one about story. Forgive me. I remember it was like how stories can impact mental health.
that might have been I'm totally gonna say it wrong. It was like Exillion magazine. Is I think that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, that's the one. I remember it started with an E, but I don't remember. Yeah.
That
So
was really exciting. I was actually really happy how that turned out. But I love talking about storytelling because again I think again I'm just gonna say this because I didn't mention this, but I think if we want to see more of a cultural acceptance of people who are bigger, I think we just need to put them in media places.
yeah,
Like, can we actually have a character who's overweight, who's not comical, who actually has a serious storyline? And also, their storyline doesn't have to their storyline does not have to revolve around their weight. Because every time I'll see like a person who's overweight in a serious show, their main focus is always I need to lose weight. I have body
yeah,
issues,
it's
and I
part of
understand.
the yeah.
But the thing I don't like is I love that they have they're like actually verbalizing their body issues, the stuff we may not see in media. But then the solution was to lose weight, and then we never hear about their body issues again. I'm like, no. And even if they did lose weight, I really don't think their body issues are going to go away.
Right.
Like I think that's really interesting. Is like, like I think we're taught that people overweight, once they get to that body type that they think looks best, I don't think that changes much. I mean, it definitely might change their self esteem and everything, but
Yeah.
people have body issues that don't love themselves and just change for the sake of it. They're gonna find ways again to not love
Yeah.
themselves, and it's a hard process when you go through it that way.
Yeah. There's when it comes to body, I am fully in favor of like doing it with a psychologist or a counselor or someone who can help you through the reasons for why you're struggling.
Yeah,
Because I think if you don't understand the reasons for why your behaviors are causing you to do certain things, then you're more likely just going to revert back to them. Like back to the bad behaviors. That's what I'm trying to say. Like things that aren't good for you.
yeah, wow, that is really true. And one of the things I got to do was really exciting. I actually went to the White House. I don't know if you saw that.
I
um,
did.
yeah, I got to go to the White House for the first ever youth mental health mental first ever mental health youth action forum. It was planned by MTV, and it was
Hmm.
exciting. But the one thing that I did see is the people chosen. There were not a lot of people who had, you know, it didn't feel like it was diverse body types. And so, being someone who was the biggest in the group, I was always like, I don't look right. I don't like the way I look. And so, everyone was dressed super nice, and I just felt like there were times where I wasn't included because of my body, but there wasn't something that was purposely done. You know what I mean? Like that's just definitely
Do you
what I
think
was
that
feeling.
was Yeah, and do you think that was something that you like clearly noticed, or was it something you think might have been like you were being hard on yourself and thinking maybe you were assuming that, or what do you think?
I think because we started off on Zoom, and here's another thing that I find really interesting, is that for a long time, people have been able to kind of conceal how they look. They did not have to
Mm.
out themselves as plus size. Let's say they got a new job and they've been completely on the screen on Zoom virtually. I think there's some anxiety that comes with going back to the workplace for people who don't know that you're an
Hmm.
overweight person. I think that there's huge anxiety when it comes to that. It's like, even when I went on a trip, like went on a work trip, I was like, this whole role has been virtual. I'm like incredibly nervous because I didn't want to show my body at all. I was like, I really don't want to go. I really didn't want to go. I was really excited about it, but that was one of the things I was really scared about, which was like,
Yeah.
how are they going to feel about me? Will I be hired? There were so many things I had to think about. But again, going back to the mental health thing, I don't think that it was apparent because everything was online. But like kind of like when I saw everyone, I was like, wow, I really don't sometimes fit the mold here. And that was definitely me being hard on myself because that's how I feel in a lot of spaces. Not just that. The space was really inclusive and understanding and great. But again, I feel like you just have those underlying feelings all the time.
Sure. Because again, we were told our whole life this is the standard, and if you're not at the standard, then you know you're gonna have issues. Um, Human nature, we need to survive by we're social creatures. It's if we're not accepted, that's a danger. It's like a ancient danger in our brain. We're like we need to be accepted. So I like that example you were saying about people meeting for the first time after being virtual.
Yeah.
It's sad because there's a stress now. The stress is they're going to see me, they're going to judge me, and then I'm going to be treated differently because society says they need to treat me differently because I have an issue that is somehow my fault, and therefore it needs to be like judged. Like it's sad.
Hmm.
I think the real answer should be who cares. Like this is John. John looks like this. Why do you need to have an opinion? You're not
Yeah.
John's doctor. You're not John's husband or wife. Like this is John. Like I wish we get to a society where that could just be the case.
And the unfortunate thing is, uh, I mean, of course, I want that too. The unfortunate thing is, like, we'll definitely have to do something to change that because it's not gonna
Mhm.
change itself. If it's talking about these issues more openly, or talking about body image, or just again putting people in corporate who are plus size, just breaking the stigma, and then because then, like, if someone goes for an interview and they're plus size and they see not a single plus size person, I'm gonna think, wow, this is a great job opportunity. I don't feel comfortable here. And you may lose out on incredible talent and incredible people who could do exceedingly well in these roles that they're applying for.
Oh
But
yeah,
because they're not seeing themselves represented, they may not feel safe, and they may not want to work there. And so you
right.
might you're definitely going to lose out. And that's why I love that companies are being inclusive to people all across the world, or people who are from different races or different backgrounds. Because it's like if you were hiring from similar backgrounds, people who look the same, how is your company really growing? I think at a time it could, but now it's not. I don't think it's possible at all. And I think you
No.
need that. You're going to need the diversity to continue growing.
Yes.
And again, if you just think about it, it's not even just about the race, but it's like about the background and the upbringings. Because when you're even
Mhm.
just like your roles and your majors in college, there's so many things that make up a diverse team, and you need that to always question critically, kind of like what you were saying, like always question
Yeah.
things critically. How could a team grow without these, without people from different backgrounds and stuff?
I think that's actually a really good point. Like, if you have the same type of people, it might seem like it's great because everyone's in agreement, but it sometimes might be nice to have different opinions to bring ideas that you wouldn't have thought of yourself.
And it
So,
goes, yeah. Oh, sorry.
no, I would say that's good. I mean, obviously, you don't want someone who like you're in constant conflict with, but
Yeah.
having different ideas is huge.
Yeah, and I think people also have to consider that intersectionality and diversity goes beyond race and gender, because I think a lot of people are stuck on those identities. Because when I'll see people will be like, "Oh, this team is really diverse. There's people of color, there's women and men, or there's trans people." I'm like, it's not though, because all of them are coming from a finance background. So it's
Yeah,
diverse in
I
one
mean,
way, but if all of them are coming from similar backgrounds again, I'm not saying it's not diverse, because it's definitely diverse in other areas, but like you got to consider all these areas, because even if you have people of different backgrounds, let's say they all come from Ivy Leagues, though, you're still getting very different. You're still getting a certain perspective.
yeah,
You're not getting people from state schools. You're not getting people who are from a different country. I don't know. There's so many different things to consider. So again, diversity goes way beyond that, because I think some people get stuck on those identities that they
absolutely,
equate diversity, and they're a good step, but there's so much more that needs to be done.
absolutely. So that actually brings me to the next question, which is, what would you like to see happen? You've already mentioned that there's been tremendous growth over the last 3 years that you've seen.
Mhm.
So let's say in 2025, another 3 years from now, what would you like to see more improved on between now and then?
I would like to see companies have an actual strategic plan already embedded in their company that they're not having to start. Of course, there's always going to be changes made. Of course, like you're always pivoting, you're always
Yeah.
changing based on how things go. But I see a lot of companies now working on rolling out diversity plans, and so I hope in the next, you said 2025, like in the next 3 years or 3 to 5 years,
Sure.
I'm hoping that
Yeah.
companies just have a stronghold of of diversity plans that they're constantly changing, but it's already there. Like workplace strategies there, workplace diversity is there. Their teams are diverse. They're consistently recruiting for from different backgrounds, and people who come from who have just diverse backgrounds to create a better team. So all that stuff, and I want to see every single yeah, I want to see every single community represented. I think it's a large task, but how are we going to change things if we don't? So I want to see trans people, I want to see indigenous people, I want to see people with disabilities, and I want them to be openly proud to work at a place like that. And one of the things that I loved about working at these certain places is they have certain things called like ERGs, like employee resource groups. Those are basically like your
Hmm.
clubs. So basically, like at General Motors when I interned there, they had a GM Plus, which that was basically their
Okay.
LGBTQ employee resource group. Basically, that's for just employees to come together who identify as LGBTQ, and
That's awesome.
they'll have work events, and they even did like a really cool workshop with GM Able about like doing what does it mean to be LGBTQ and neurodiverse. And I was like, whoa, that was so exciting to see,
That's
because
amazing. Yeah.
yeah, stuff
That's
like that. So I would love to see just more ERGs come out, because like I've seen companies now that are just starting ERGs. I'm like, that's great. It's a little late, but better late than never. But I'm
hmm
hoping that they have strong ERGs, because like in my opinion, ERGs definitely made it was a great experience working like at General Motors when I interned there. But like the ERGs totally topped it off, because I was actually in a community where I belonged with it. If it was disability, being Hispanic, or queer, because I joined all three, and
Sure.
also
Yeah.
people from different parts of the organization because I was always working with communication and PR professionals. But when I joined that, I was talking with engineers. I was talking with
Hmm.
computer
I love that.
computer people. So it's like
Yeah.
that's what's cool about ERGs too is like they definitely bring in like the cross functionality of the work, which is really exciting.
Yeah. And it reminds you that you're not alone,
Hmm.
right? Like, a big part of coming out, dealing with all that, I think we feel like we're so alone. We're the only ones that are like this. We're so weird, right? And then we go to a workplace, we deal with all those biases, and then you have an event like that where it's like, oh, there's 4 people that are similar to me. You don't feel so isolated. And that's
And
huge.
yeah, and also, I mean, because GM is a huge company, but like if you work for a company that doesn't have that, just
Mm.
be very careful. Because here's the thing too, I think that people need to be more outspoken about diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I understand why people don't though. Like, let's just say that no one's speaking out against something that's LGBTQ related, and someone does. They can easily get the label of being a token, and so
Oh, yeah.
they will now be the voice of all LGBTQ things when that is a lot of weight on your shoulders, especially if they're asking like, "Oh yeah, you're LGBTQ. Like, tell us about like some of the trans issues." I'm not even trans. I don't know. Like, you need to bring in
Yeah.
someone who actually has that experience. You can't ask the one LGBTQ person on the team.
Right. I can define it, but I can't explain it. I can't tell
Yeah.
you what it feels like. I can
Right.
give you the dictionary definition, but that's about it. No, I agree. And I think that's wonderful. And I'm glad to hear that corporations are doing more and being inclusive. One argument that drives me crazy against it is that, you know, that like affirmative action type negativeness where it's like, oh, well, now we're going to purposely hire different people that just to make it look more diverse.
Mhm.
And I think people are missing the point. It's like, no, we're being more cognizant of who we hire. If a person isn't a fit for the company, they're not a fit. But just being aware of your bias. Like, are you choosing someone who's not fat just because they are or they aren't? You know what I'm trying to say? Like,
No, exactly.
just being more. Yeah, it's. I hate that argument. It drives me crazy.
No, yeah. It's not even affirmative action. It's just hiring people. You know.
Yeah,
And because yeah, that's pretty annoying. And I understand. Like, I can see people's concerns, but people have to understand that you have to definitely think and have empathy of how they felt, the amount of work that they've had to do to get in these roles, and I didn't even touch
exactly.
on imposter syndrome. I'm sure you've heard of imposter syndrome, right?
Oh yeah, we all have it. A
Yeah,
lot of
that's
people have it. Yeah.
especially again if you're going to be plus size and you're going to the workplace, that's something you're going to experience. But that's something I'm always wondering too, to be honest with you, because like you said at the beginning, that companies want to make money and they're going to jump on these trends. I see companies that I really can see the intentionality and that they're really doing the work because it's the right thing to do and they want to see their
Yeah.
company grow. But I'll see companies that aren't doing that, and I will share a controversial opinion right now. I think it's really great to see more people of color on the screen. And I know that there are some people that have issue. Even I'm just gonna say it, the new live action, Little Mermaid, because she's
Oh
gonna be
yeah.
played by a black actress. Okay, there are definitely some valid reasons why people are against it. Some aren't. Some are just against that. But the reason why I'm not like happy about the decision was because here I'll explain why. I don't want it to sound bad, but because it just again it felt like Disney is just bringing in a black actress for the diversity. It doesn't feel like it was authentic. That's how I feel because again, even though they're bringing in a black actress, she's still playing the part of someone who was written to be white. It's still like
Right.
it's still written by a white experience and it's not an authentic black experience. So like she's playing someone that's not really authentically supposed to be black unless they really do change the story, but I don't know if they will.
I
And
don't
so
know.
what I want to
Yeah.
see more from Disney is not that. Do not just bring in an actress to play a part to bring in diversity. Actually write the stories. Write the authentic stories of people of color.
Mhm.
Bring in writers who are of color and actually tell those stories instead of kind of in my opinion it's to me I see it as doing it for the brownie points when I see stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, you've heard the issues with the Lord of the Rings show, right?
Mhm.
Like, that's being trashed, a lot of it with diversity.
Mhm.
Um, but they did what you said. They wrote some darker skinned characters that a lot of it like is actually just for the show, and so it was a written character, so it's not like they're trampling on an existing character or anything like that.
Right.
And still, it wasn't good enough. My thing is, a lot. It's you're never going to know the intention
Yeah.
until you see the finished product, and hopefully, like I thought the trailer looked great.
Mhm.
I don't care if Little Mermaid is any race at all. I just hope it doesn't become an issue when the movie comes out where they're trying to overdo it or people are also blocking the movie because of it. I just want it to be like it fits the story, it fits who she is, and it just is what it is, right? Like nonchalant. This is just who the character is. I
No,
hope that's how it feels.
yeah, no, and I completely agree. And just watching the trailer, she sounds amazing. Like her singing, I don't even really,
Yeah.
I didn't really know about her, so I was like, oh, that sounds really good. Like I'm actually like
Yeah.
really excited for it. But on the other hand, it's not something that we should just accept either. Which is like not accept what I mean. Like don't just accept Disney doing this. Actually,
Right.
hold them accountable and like, can you actually write stories that like are coming from an actual Black experience? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or
I get what
or
you're saying. Like, don't just shoehorn it in just for the points to
yeah,
like check it off the list. Yeah, I don't think anyone likes that because they don't feel the authenticity of it. It's like, oh, you're clearly checking the box. Make it authentic. Yeah, I felt like the new Thor movie kind of did that with the gay characters. They had like a quick scene.
oh,
They talked about it, and I'm like, all right, it's cool that it was in it. I really shouldn't be mad, but like, check. It's like, okay,
oh
cool.
my,
Because
oh that's
they hinted that Valkyrie was going to be more like she was going to show more of her bi side, and she had like literally a blink and you miss it conversation about it. So it's mini steps, right? We can't just get there overnight. But yeah, I agree. Like authenticity and trying is huge. Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah, and
So,
again, someone who's oh sorry, I was gonna say lastly, just someone who's so
oh no, you're fine.
passionate about storytelling. It's not just bringing the stories. Like I said, it's not just about bringing plus size people to the screen, because there have been plus size people to the screen. It's like, can we actually like write them with depth? And it's not only about their weight. That there's so much more to them as a character, not just how they look or
Yeah,
their race or whatever it is. That they have millions of components, not one-dimensional characters. You know what I mean?
right. Yeah, like a gay character without it being gay. Actually, a great example of that was, oh my gosh, Happy Endings. It was a show that came out. It was like from 2011 to 14. If you haven't seen it, it's a great show. It's a group of friends who live in Chicago, and one of the characters is a gay dude, and he's like he's not a stereotype gay. He's just a regular, and they don't really like they talk about it, but like it's just part of who he is. And there's a couple episodes where it's a little bit about it, but like it's just done really well. It's a part of who he is, but that's not his character. Sorry, it's not his character. It's just part of him. It's great. I thought that was a great job.
I know, I love that, and I've always said that. I think that, of course, you want characters and their gayness to be part of the story, so people can actually understand, what it means
Sure.
to be gay and understand that. But I also love the idea that, like, like let's have a storyline where the character is gay, but that's not their story. That it's just like a
Correct.
natural part of their story. Because it's like if we can see that, you're like, oh, it's just normal, because it is.
That's
you
what
know?
makes it normalized. Yeah, like I
Yeah.
think, Modern Family did that pretty well with Cam and Mitchell. I think that was a huge show in breaking into people's homes about like gay couples are just like regular people. Like that's fine. But yeah, same thing with race. Same thing with plus size. I think women have it worse. Like guys have it a little bit better than women when it comes to plus size. I think women are way more shamed about it, which is sad. But yeah, like just normalizing it by just making it there and not drawing attention to the like negative associations we have with it. And again, being aware of our bias. That's what it's about.
Yeah, I agree, and it's always the one thing I do find unfortunate about queer characters is like they're always like kind of stuck in the stereotype, which is unfortunate. And I've even been told that, well, I mean, that's all people want to see from gay characters is the stereotypes. I'm like, oh no, please, let's not get into this. I'm not gonna indulge this conversation. I'm gonna walk away because no, I completely disagree with that. In fact,
Yeah.
I think that when you have gay characters that are seen as foolish and stereotypical and unintelligent, that I don't want to see at all. because that is not a reflection of a lot of gay
It's not
people.
accurate.
And
Yeah,
and
it's
there,
not
and there
accurate.
are there are people who, there are, gay people that are like that in real life, but geez, like they paint them as like totally unintelligent, like just one dimensional in these stories. I'm always like, the queer character is not just the side funny person that pivots and encourages the straight character. Gosh, that's always, I see that all the time. Like, oh, I'm gonna go to the gay character for the advice for my relationship as a straight person. I'm like, gosh, it's really frustrating
That's
to see that on
funny.
TV all the time.
Yeah, yeah. No, I know what you mean. Like, again, it's baby steps, you
Yeah.
know. But I'm curious to see that new movie that's coming out, Bros.
Hmm.
It's like one of the first ever like mainstream um, gay movie. I don't know if you saw the trailer for it, um, but I'm curious to see how that is because I
Yeah.
think they're trying to show more what it actually is like versus the stereotypes.
Oh, that would be
I don't
exciting.
know. I haven't. The movie's not out yet, but it comes out I think at the end of the month. So
Oh, very cool. Okay, I actually have not, so I'm looking forward to checking it out.
yeah, it's called Bros. Um, yeah, check out the trailer. There's a major comedian out actor who's in it, and I'm blanking. I can't think of who it is. You'll recognize him when you see it. And then the other guy who's the lead, I don't know, but yeah, it's. I'm curious to see how that goes. But yeah, again, just paying attention to your bias, you know, and all of that. So, well, thanks, Zane. I wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time to come on and talk about this with me. I think you have a lot of interesting things that you brought up, and I really, really hope what you say comes true and we have more diversity in the workplace.
Yeah, we will see. But thank you so much again. I really appreciate the conversation and the work you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been tough. I've got like 4 million things going on at once, so I'm trying to make sure that the show is like a lot of. This is a great example. Like I've had so many of these conversations with so many of my friends and people that I've met, and it amazes me how like a lot of us feel a certain way, and it's nice to just kind of talk through it because I think a lot of us share a lot of these ideas, and it's good to hear it out loud and talk through those. So that's sort of the whole point of why I'm doing this is bringing awareness to people that may not have thought about it before.
Oh, I
So
love it. Great. I'm excited to see it continue growing and all the awesome other guests you're going to have.
thank you. So Zane, I know you have like 8 million things going on too. So where can people that are listening and or watching, because this will be both, where can they find you?
Yeah, I mean, you have my name, and so basically, yeah, I'm really active on Instagram and LinkedIn. I also have, you know, different things I do. I have my own digital magazine where you talk about mental health. Please consider following us there because we share messages of imposter syndrome, overcoming barriers, telling really, underrepresented stories of things that we don't talk about, stuff we didn't talk about today. I got to share stories through there and do interviews from people who have been raped, who have been involved in
Yeah.
gangs, and so who have experienced, severe trauma, but using it as inspiration for others. And I can't, and that's not easy. Like that's why I love featuring these people because not everyone can do that, and I love that they're like a beacon of hope for others, and that they've used their
Uh,
trauma to help other people. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. What's it called so people can follow it?
Positive Vibes magazine, and and it's Positive Vibes Mag, the handle. And if you just follow me, you'll be able to find it because I have it in my bio. But yeah, definitely check that out. And if you ever just want to have a conversation with me or have any questions about the workplace or resumes, anything, honestly, please hit me up.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for listening to another episode of the Bear Share Show. You can find the Bear Share Show on Anchor, YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, pretty much anywhere that you listen to podcasts or watch podcasts. And I look forward to doing another episode with you guys later. So hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Bye bye now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Zane.